right, welcome back. We're here on our web page looking at our notes, and we're ready to start the section on collapsing over variables. And what we're going to do in this section is create the total income per quarter for our 12 families. So, we have the income for the first quarter of the year, the second quarter of the year, and we're going to do this manually. Okay, so we have here FAMINC 1, FAMINC 2, FAMINC 3, and that is the income for the family for the first quarter. And here we have the income for the second quarter of the year, the third quarter, and the fourth quarter of the year. So that's what we have in our example data set. And then we run our standard proc print to make sure everything goes in okay. And so you see here that this is the output, and it looks like everything's looking fine and dandy. Let's come down here to our program, and let's actually do this. Let's run it. So here's the data set, here's the proc print, and let's click on our running person. And just like on the web page, here's the output, and everything went in just fine. So we saw here, if we come back to the program, 4 lines actually of some addition and stuff. And you can see we're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And you ask yourself, why am I doing this over and over and over again? Let's use an array. Or in this case, let's use 2 arrays. All right, this is going to be similar to our previous example in that one array will contain elements that are existing variables, and the second array will contain variables that we are just creating right here in this data step. So we're going to call our data step here, or the data set, I'm sorry, quarter array. We're going to use FAMINC as the set. And here's our first array statement. We called it a FAMINC. Again, we're not very creative. We have our 12 elements here, and these 12 elements are FAMINC 1 through FAMINC 12, and these are existing variables. We have the second array statement that is going to be the variables that we're going to create here, right? So we're going to have the array, and then we're going to call this a quarter, and we're going to say that there are 4 elements in this array, and they're going to be INQ1 through INQ4, and these are the new variables. And these are exactly these variables right here that we are creating. So we're going to do Q per quarter, 1 to 4. So we have our array for the new variables, and here's our index counter thingy, and so that's Q. And then we have our old array, and some math that I'll explain in a second, plus the array again, math I'll explain in a second, and then this. So this corresponds to this corresponds to this corresponds to this. Now, what is going on in here? Well, remember what this is. This is the index number, right? This is the part here that tells SAS which element of the array that they're currently talking about. So what is this? 3 times Q minus 2. Well, 3 times Q, when Q is 1, that's 3. Minus 2, that's 1. So this is a way of saying a FAMINC 1 plus, okay, here we go. So this is 3 plus 3 times 1, which is 3, minus 1, that's 2. So this number here is actually 2. And here this is just the 3 times the 1, and so that's 3. And you see that that corresponds to the 1, 2, 3 here. Now why did we do this instead of saying 1, 2, 3? Well, because when SAS comes through on the second time of the loop, Q is now 2. And so 3 times 2 is 6. Minus 2, well, that gives us the 4, which is this 4 right here. 3 times 2 is 6, minus 1, that's the 5, which is this 5 here. And this is 6, and 3 times 2 is 6. And so what we're illustrating here is that you can actually do some sort of math computations here in these subscripts or indicators, however you want to call them, to get the numbers just the way that you want them, so that when SAS cycles through the loop, all of the indexes are the way they should be. We have the end statement that corresponds to our do, and then we have run. So let's scroll down here a little bit, and you can see here in the notes that we actually have examples of what's really going on here, so that you can follow this little subscripting thing here. Kind of a cool trick, and so that's really what it is. I've scrolled a little too far. Let's come up a little bit. We'll highlight all this stuff, and we'll click on our running person. There we go. So here's the proc print from doing it manually, and here's the proc print from doing it with the arrays. And you can see that we get exactly the same thing. Alrighty, so that's something else. Let's come back here to our program, and we're going to scroll down some. Okay, IDing patterns across variables using arrays. Let's come back to the web page for the intro to this, and of course we need to scroll down some. Alrighty, this is the story. We're looking for a pattern across variables, and the pattern we're looking for is months in which the income was less than half of the previous month, and we want to store this information in dummy variables, so basically 0, 1 variables from low inc 2 to low inc 12. Okay, why low inc 2 and not low inc 1? Well, because month 1 has no previous month, so there's nothing to compare it to. Okay, also we're going to create a variable that we're going to call ever, which indicates if the income has ever been less than half of the previous month for any month in the year. Okay, so there's that, and let's have a look here at what the program's actually doing. So we have our data statement, okay, familiar with that, set statement, no big deal. We have a length statement here. Ever is going to be a string variable, and we're going to indicate that with the $, and we're going to give it a length of 4. Okay, and ever is going to take on values of yes and no here, so we gave it just a little bit of extra room, and so that's what this length statement here is doing. We have an array statement. Okay, we're very familiar with this array statement. We know exactly what this is doing, what this is all about. We come here to our next array statement, and as in all the previous examples that we've seen, this second array statement is creating the new variables. Now I want to point out that there is no really good reason why this array statement can't come before this array statement. We're trying to be consistent to make things easy for people to learn, but in reality, if you find it more intuitive or just easier to have these things switched, then that's fine, and SAS isn't going to have a problem with it. Now, here's something new. This 2:12, what's this all about? Well, we've been glossing over a little something here. This here, where it's saying that we have the 12 elements, the reason that it's 12 is because this is implicitly starting at 1. You could see that if it was implicitly starting at any other number, the number of elements would in fact not be 12. So there is an implicit 1: before this 12 here. But because so frequently the array starts counting at 1, SAS just has this as a default and spares you the typing of the 1: all the time. However, when you don't want to start at 1, you want to start at some other number, that's allowable, perfectly doable, reasonable, easy to do, and you do it with this number : here. So this is the number we want to start at, and this is the number we want to end with. Okay, and so we have named our variables like this for the new variables. Okay, so that's what that's all about. Do M 2 through 12, okay, M for month. So if afam inc M, so our original variables, are less than afam inc M minus 1, okay, the minus 1 because we're looking back, we're looking at the previous month. divided by 2, so this is the less than half part, less than half, then a low fam inc, or a low inc, m, equals 1. So we set it to 1 when this is true, otherwise it is set to 0. Okay, so that's what this is doing. Again, we're doing a little bit of math here for the subscripts, and this just allows us to look back to previous variables. Okay, and so there's that. We have the end statement that goes along with our do, and then we have some other statements here in our data step. So sum low is a new variable that we're creating, and we're using the sum function here. And here's some notation. I'm not sure if everyone's seen this before. We can say of low inc colon. And what does this do? Well, it sums over all of the variables with low inc as part of the name. So that's what this colon is. It's picking up all of the variables that have this as part of the name. And that's very handy if you had variables, for example, that weren't consecutively numbered. If we had low inc 1, low inc 3, low inc 7, low inc 2, well, you know, you'd have to kind of rifle through and try and find them all, and this spares you from having to do that. Okay, so if this new variable sum low is greater than 0, then our variable ever is going to be set to yes, and it's in quotes because it's a string variable, and we declared it as a string up here on this length statement. And if sum low equals 0, then ever is going to equal no. And then we're going to drop out m and sum low because we don't need them in our data set. Okay, that was an awful lot. Let's come back over here to our program here. And here we see the data set or data step that we have just discussed. I'm going to highlight that and the corresponding proc print. And let's click on our running person. So there we go. So we see that we have all of this, and here are our dummy variables that we created, 0, 1s, and here is the variable ever, and we see yes, yes, and no. Okay, here's a question for you. Why is ever sitting here in the middle of our data set? You know, we assigned these values down here, yes and no. Why isn't it at the end? It's not, because SAS read in the original data set, so that's why all the fam inc variables are up there at the front. Here's the length statement that declares the variable ever, so it comes in right after the fam inc variables, and then we get down to here where we create the low inc variables, and that's why the variables are ordered in the data set the way that they are. Okay, so that's that, and let's see here, do we have any other questions? Okay, yeah, we did have one question, and that was regarding this use of here. And you could have said something like x1, x3, comma, x5, or whatever here, and it would have done the math just the same. So if you'd said x1 through x3, comma, whatever, and that would have worked too. So you can specify anything that you want after this of. It doesn't have to be this. You can use commas to separate out variables as you need to. So that's that. So again, we need to take another little break, and we'll be right back to look at reshaping data. Why too long?